Welcome back. Hello, and welcome to another session of our beginning Java tutorials. Today's lesson is hopefully going to be the shortest one of the series because it's actually just dealing with one Java class, and that is the math class. And the math class is one of those helper utilities that will aid you in doing a bunch of different mathematical operations in Java. So remember how we talked about Java has a collection of libraries and a collection of classes, and those things provide features that allow you to do things like reading input or doing math or accessing files and all those sorts of things. The math class is one of those. And the math class is just a collection of methods that other programmers have written designed to help you with math. For those of you that haven't seen this yet, this is something you should be really familiar with, and it's called the API, the Java API. Every class that is written and used in Java has this API document, and I literally just Googled this, Java math class, and this is the page that came up. And what it does is it will tell you every variable and every method that you have access to in this math class. So when I look at it, I can see that I have two variables that might come in handy. The one that you're going to probably use in this class would be pi. And remember, of course, that this isn't going to be a perfect representation of pi. You can see that it's using a double, which means that it is going to be an 8-byte representation of pi. Then you'll see next is the list of all of the methods that exist in the math class. You're going to notice that they're all static, and I realize I've only talked briefly about what that means, but it means that you're going to be able to call these methods directly with no fuss. You can just say math dot and whatever function it is that you want to use here. I'm going to go over just a few of them, the ones that are most popular and most common, and I encourage you to come to this spot and look at some of the others, the things that you can do. So we're going to start with, actually we're going to start right here with a little bit of mathing. When we deal with angles in Java, most of these functions that we're going to look at assume radians. Now radians is, for those of you who are kind of not familiar, radians is another way of representing angle. So we're used to using degrees, but in Java, it is going to assume that you are using radians. So if you're trying to calculate cosine, for example, the information that Java is expecting is going to be in radians. We're not used to thinking in terms of radians. We probably don't want our users to think in terms of radians. And so the first of the useful functions here is 2 degrees and 2 radians. And what this will do, especially this one down here, is it will take a number that we know in degrees, like 90 degrees, and it will turn it into this other representation system, into this radians representation system. And so the way I would use this is I would say math dot 2 radians, and I would put in my degrees, and this will give back to me a double representing the radians of that. So, you know, I would put in, oops, I already messed that up there, but I would say something like, you know, double rad equals math.2 radians 90, and it would take that 90, represent it as radians for Java, and then you can use that however you want in some of the other formulas. If you ever get an answer back in radians and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do with radians, then there's also the 2 degrees method, which will take something in radians and give back to you what you're familiar with, which is the degrees. For those of you who are curious, radians work in terms of pi, right? So the representation of radians is going to be some sort of a fraction of pi. So 30 degrees is the same as representing pi over 6, or pi over 3 for 60 degrees, and so on and so forth. Anyways, back to the math class. So the other things that you're going to be looking at are square root would be another very common one. So there's no square root symbol that you can use in the keyboard, and so we have a method in order to accomplish that square root for us. And the use of it, all of the use of all of these is going to be the same. You need to look at the return type. So, double square root is equal to math.square root, and I can put in my number, so 16, and done. It's going to calculate the square root, and it's going to give me back my result. All of these methods are called just giving the name of that math class. Because they're all static, we access it just by calling the name of the class. It's kind of a different way of doing things. So what else have we got here? Sine. So here we've got the ability to calculate the sine of something. So you give it the angle in radians, and it will return back to you the fraction. You can also do inverse sine. So that's also in here, and it's called a sine. We'll get to that as we scroll back to the top. Rounding is a way to take a number and to round it into an integer. So this is not decimal rounding. This is to round properly so that it just gives you an integer answer. And again, same sort of thing. Integer r equals math.round, and you can give it whatever number you want inside here. What else have we got? Moving right along up this list of awesome things. You'll see we're skipping so many things. Random. So random we talked about already a little bit. This is going to give us a random double that is between 0 and 0.9999999, as much as it can represent inside there. And so you can use this to give you a quick random double if you want. It doesn't take any parameters. But we did talk about how there is a seed that's kind of being used in the background for these things. Next up is power. So this is 2 to the exponent 3. Right? So the a to the exponent b. So this is going to be, for those of you that know this notation, it's going to look like this. So the way that I use that is I could say, double answer is equal to math.power, and I could put 2, 3. And this will give us 8 and store 8 into the answer. So moving right along, we're going to look into minimum and maximum. I don't use these very often, but if you ever just need to make a decision between two numbers and know which one is bigger than the other, it's a little shorthand. You could do it with an if statement, but this is a bit of a shorter way of just telling you which one is smaller or telling you which one is bigger. Same idea, it's going to take in two numbers, either doubles or floats or integers or longs. There's a different version for each one, and it will return back. Now when you see something like this doesn't change the way that you use it. It just means that Java will decide which one of these to use depending on what number you give it. And so it's going to choose whether to run the version with the double or the version with the floats or whatever the case may be. Logarithm, that should be pretty straightforward for those of you that know logarithms. Keep going right along. Floor. So floor basically means that it is going to return the integer that is lowest, just lowest. So if you have 12.8, the floor of 12.8 is going to be 12. 12.9 is still going to be 12. The floor. And then you've got the ceiling. There's another function called ceiling. Floor will always round down, and ceiling will always round up for you. What else have we got here? Cosine, again, we're going through those. There's that ceiling function. So returns the smallest, closest to negative infinity double value that is greater than or equal to the argument and is equal to a mathematical integer. Oh my gosh. It just always rounds up. What else do we have? I told you about that inverse. So this is going to come through there. And what else do we have? The last one that's really of interest is absolute value. And so that's that function where you've got in math, you kind of have this, the absolute value of some particular number. And the way that you do it is you give it a number, either a double, a float, or an integer, and you go ahead and do that. So remember that this can start to look a little bit weird when you start to combine these things together, because I can do math.power, and I can do math.square root of 2, and I can put all of this to the power of math dot floor of 12.222. Oops, I guess I should probably type that better, but that's okay. And so you can start to combine all of these together into your calls. And many formulas, if you're trying to emulate the quadratic formula or the distance formula for grade 10 or grade 11 math, you're going to have to start to be able to piece these together. And that's it. 11 minutes. This must be a record for us, but I tried to cover most of the major functions of the math class. Please remember that when you're dealing with sine, cosine, tangent, all those sorts of things, remember that Java is working in radians, and so you really have to use those 2 degrees and 2 radians functions in order to be able to get answers that are meaningful, that make sense to you as the user. So that's the math class. Check out the API on your own. Get familiar with the concept of APIs in Java. And next time I see you, we're going to be talking about those other kinds of loops that I alluded to in the last video. Take care.